This is episode 41 with public speaker, podcaster, and diversity brand strategist, Rockson. Hello and welcome to an episode of the UV Effect podcast. Thank you so much for returning if you are a returning listener. And if you're new here, thanks so much for hopping on aboard. I hope you enjoyed this episode. So today we have another guest for you today, and he goes by the name Rockson. And Rockson is a pretty special guy. He is what is called a third culture kid, which is someone who spent the formative parts of their childhood years, which is 0 to 18, outside of their parents' culture, which means that they were traveling a lot. They weren't really in their, they didn't grow up in the culture of their parents, so to speak. So they were, going different countries, or they were, living somewhere that just wasn't within that same realm of the culture of their parents. So basically, in this episode, we're going to be talking about how this upbringing has molded him into the person that he is today, and how it has allowed him to, as he says, help people connect across cultures and use their differences to make a difference. So I love both of those things. The first part, helping people connect across cultures, is so fantastic, and you will learn in this episode how important it is to reach people that are outside of, your culture, that are outside of your comfort zone, so to speak, that are in different countries, maybe even across the street, but being able to reach someone that is different from you in some way. He really he specializes on that, and it's such an important thing, and you're going to learn about how necessary it is to really get different perspectives in this episode. In the second part, it says using his differences to make a difference. That's so big. Of course, that is what the UV Effect podcast is all about: unique value, using your unique value to impact the world. And that's what he's about too. He's about using his differences, the things that make him unique, the things that make him stand out, like being a third culture kid, and using those differences to impact the world and teaching others how to use their differences to impact the world as well. So we're going to learn about his story, as well as learn a few tips on what it means to be different and how powerful and impactful it can be in your life and the lives of others based off his story. And also, again, talking about culture and talking about reaching out to other people and just being able to reach across the world, and realizing that we're not the only people here, that, we're not the only ones that matter. This is a whole large world that we live in, and there's so much to be given and there's so much to be taken. So definitely keep listening in if you're interested on that global mindset, and you want to build a global mindset, and you want to be more confident in yourself and in your differences. Then definitely keep listening in. I'm very excited for you guys to listen to this episode of the UV Effect with Rockson. Mr. Teo, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you for having me. We were introduced by a mutual friend, heard a lot of great things, so I'm excited to, unleash my UV effect to the audience. So thank you for having me.
Same here, and I'm interested in to learn more about your story. I was doing a little bit of research, a little stalking about you on the back end, and learning about your story, and you have a very interesting story, so I'm very excited to get into that now and to discuss what you do and why you do it. So Let's just go straight into the first question. So I learned that you are the son of a diplomat, and which means that you have really grown up in multiple different countries because you traveled often when you were young. So I want to know how did that kind of life affect you positively and negatively?
That's a very great question. So for me, I have to take you way back. So the first 9 years of my life were spent in the military dictatorship. I grew up in 2 military dictatorships. And so initially my, introduction to leadership was, all these ruthless suppression of human rights, violations on your freedoms, exiles if you reported against the government, basically things that led to people not being inclusive. And Nigeria is a country of over 250 ethnic groups. And I just remember back then I would always wonder, what type of leader it would take to sort of bring all these people from different backgrounds together. And that was always embedded in my head. And then once we transitioned into a military, to a civilian government rather, my dad's job as a diplomat became super important. Now we were repairing all our relationships with different countries in the world. So that meant I grew up in 5 countries and 4 continents by the time I was 17. And initially, when you first move from, that type of regime to just sort of going to all these countries, I remember being 10 years old, and I was like this skinny Nigerian kid with a thick Nigerian accent in a French-speaking country in an American national school. You tend to feel almost inferior because everybody else is different, but you feel even more different. And I remember initially I was excited about the prospect of moving, but then when I got there, I felt very, very inferior. I was very less than. And I had interesting conversations with my mom, and I'd be like, Mom, like, someone pointed out my hair and said it was so curly, or they made fun of my sound and my way I pronounce this word. And all those used to affect me initially, but my mom would always try to tell me, it's okay, we're all different, it doesn't matter. And after a while of, crying and then going back home as a kid, I decided to do something about it. And I just focused on what it was that I liked. Sports was my first love and still is. And I just looked around and saw that people were playing, basketball. I only known how to play soccer then. But and I was like, fine, I'm going to resolve to know how to play basketball so I can make friends. And I went to the library, as you normally do when you try and learn a new sport.
Right.
And I know I did. I read up all the books on basketball, the history, the fundamental, and I saw that there were 2 doctors. There was Dr. Naismith, who invented basketball, and then there was Dr. J, who played for the Philadelphia 76ers. And I basically made sure I knew everything. Once I figured that out, I picked up all the new magazines so I could figure out who the current players were, and then I went to the best basketball player on campus, and I asked him, hey, could you teach me how to I know everything. You teach me how to play. And our 1-on-1s became 2-on-2s and 3-on-3s and 4-on-4s and 5-on-5s. And all of a sudden, my inferiority complex started to wane away because I was playing with people from Taiwan, Cote d'Ivoire, United States, Cameroon, and it didn't matter where we came from. All that mattered was our common goal to win. And that just was the first instinct in me. So I gave you the juxtaposition of negative and positive. Yeah. But once I found a way to find connectors everywhere I traveled, it became a much smoother process for me to travel and move on to different countries.
I find that very interesting that in order for you to kind of get to that place where you didn't feel as inferior anymore, it really came from developing the skill and then seeing other people that also had this skill and realizing that, yes, we're all very different, but, we have common goals. I think that's very interesting because I think when we look at ourselves, we look at, whatever environment we're in, we're trying to kind of mesh in and fit together to feel like we're in place, and I think that best way of trying to feel like we're in place, although for me personally, I think that trying to feel too much like you're in place might kind of hinder your ability to really be yourself, but there is a certain positive to trying to find yourself in place because you learn what kind of skills and what kind of talents that work best for you, and then also how you can work with someone else to kind of build your talents as well with other people.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And for me, what I learned was initially what I was getting frustrated at was I was trying too much to be like other people. And then I looked at what I was good at, what I naturally liked, which was sports. I generally love sports. So I picked up, soccer at the time. But if you ask me now, soccer, basketball, tennis, like those are my top 3. But I was like, this is something I can connect around. I really love what sports represents because, when you grow up in military dictatorship, the only time people come together in the country is during the World Cup or during the Olympics. So that was ingrained in my mind. And so I just basically extrapolated that and said, I'm going to do something I like and see if I can connect to people on that same playing field, as opposed to trying to do that and trying to take that class, even though it wasn't naturally me. So, yeah.
And that's actually a big part of the UV effect and what it's about. You're developing your unique value. A big part of that is about being able to figure out what you're good at based off of, your internal gifts, right? So
absolutely,
you're looking to find what it is that you can naturally grasp onto because of what you are already naturally good at. So you kind of find those connections. And so I say that part of the reason why I kind of point out that piece of the story is just because that really does fall in line with what we're talking about. And how important it is to be able to have a skill set, to be able to be able to connect with something, because that helps you to connect better with yourself. So I really like that part of your story and what you talked about there. You talked about something else too. You said how you how people would point out that you had curly hair, or that you look different, or whatever it was.
Yes.
Which I'm sure. I hopefully this isn't a imposing question, but where was it specifically that you? What places where did those types of, I guess, bullying or whatever it was impact you the most?
Well, yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm an open book. So for me, when I was growing up around that time, this was Burkina Faso. So it's a French-speaking country in West Africa, but I went to the American International School, and I grew up where black is the majority, right? That's the country. You're Nigerian. There's no, you don't really think about it.
Yeah.
And so it was really, if he was the guy was just asking me curiously, it's like it's such a circular, curly thin, like it's like that, and I had never noticed that until you said it. And this was around the time of NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, and so everybody had spiky hair and curly hair. And I remember going to my mom and saying, "Hey, Mom, I need to spike up my hair, and I need to have all these gel." And she was like, your hair, that's just not how it works. and that was the experience. But yeah, it was that. It was the school was mainly white. There were some, and it's a bunch of diplomatic kids, people from missionary backgrounds, people that just have all that. So it was just a weird experience, and that was me becoming cognizant of everything for the first time. And I think that happens with a lot of youth today, and that's why I'm in the field of diversity and inclusion. I want people to really understand. My mission statement is use your difference to make a difference. So I want people to understand what's different about them, and that. But yeah, luckily I had a supportive system like my mom to basically remind me of my value and tell me that the big different, it doesn't make me less than, it's me. So, but yeah, that was then.
And I love that message, using your differences to make a difference. I love that. Of course, that falls right in line with what we're talking about.
Yeah, I guess that's why we're connected. But yeah, that's the foundation of everything I do. That's what UID stands for, and I love it. So, yeah.
I think that's so important, and I think it's kind of overlooked. Like, people will talk about that idea that, oh, you're different and that's special, and put that at the forefront of your life, but not so many people will really enact that to its fullest potential. A lot of times people will be different as long as it fits inside the perspective of life, or the box of what group you're in. So you can be different to a certain point, or act a certain way up to a certain point. And so I think people are often very afraid of being rejected. Obviously, that's a constant kind of fear that people feel. It's, you don't want to be rejected because you talk a different way, or you think something different. So I wonder, based off of your experiences, do you feel that you have grown less fearful of rejection or more accepting of rejection?
I embrace rejection. We can go on to the next question, which is a full-on example of rejection. I've gotten so used to it. To me, I don't, I either lose or learn. I either win or learn. I don't lose, right? So if I lose, I don't consider that losing than something. If something doesn't go my way, I'm learning from that. And so I know you're going to ask about my near-death experience, but I'll just segue into that by saying I came to the United States when I was 17 for college. This was the first time I was here in the United States, which is interesting because by the time I was here, everybody already assumed I was African-American because I had moved around so much that my accent is like a mishmash of random things. So no one really associated me with being Nigerian. But came here really gung-ho. I was like, I'm this international justice warrior. I'm going to do something on the international scale, whether it's United Nations or law or whatever. And so, I came here for college and went to school in Virginia, and I was like, I got involved quickly with nonprofits that were doing stuff in sub-Saharan Africa, raising awareness about HIV or helping provide resources for kids that didn't have that. And so by the time I was ready to graduate, I thought I had built enough experience. I was the rare type of student that was working with nonprofits as well as going to school. So I was like, I'm hacking the system. I know they're going to tell me that I don't have experience, but I'm like, nah, I already have it. And so I started applying. I applied 85 times. All of them said no. I applied to over 85 job rejections, got no. You're too young, too green, you're international, we don't sponsor your visa, all these various iterations. And I started to panic, right? At this point, you graduate, the expectation is to get a job. And if you're international, you only have a timeline, because if you can't find a job, you got to go back to your country. And so I started freaking out and reached out to everyone that had hired me before and said, hey, I did well for you all. Could you maybe think of sponsoring my visa? And luckily one said yes. And I remember, saying, okay, fine. I got one person to sponsor it. So I entered the lottery, and the H-1B is a lottery system. H-1B is a visa for foreigners to get here. But the problem is it's a lottery system where there are only so many allocated every year. Think about, I don't want to butcher, maybe 80,000 or 45,000, something like that. And over 120,000 apply, so it's only a few given, and so it's lottery. And so luckily I got that, and I remember getting that notification of, hey, your visa has been approved, you can stay in the country, you can work here legally. And I sent that to my mom and dad, and like, Mom, Dad, we got it. And my mom and dad were like, our son has done it. Look at him in America, yeah. And we were ecstatic. But the kicker here was, it wasn't what I wanted to do. This is never a world I imagined for myself. Here I was doing a job in social media, except when I went there for work, they said, we're not going to have you do social media stuff because we don't really believe in it. We want you to do sales, and your quota is $10,000 a month. That's what you have to make. Here are your books. So no orientation, just figure it out. And I was like, man, gosh, wow. I mean, on one hand, I'm grateful. I can stay in the country legally. I'm here. On the other hand, this isn't what I want to do, and I have a huge learning curve. So that became my life for a year and a half. I basically resolved that this was going to be the next 60 years of my life, and in fact, I gave up, essentially. I was like, there's too many obstacles, which is not typical of my general disposition. But that was until one fateful day. It was August 22, 2012. I was driving to the same place of work. I stepped on the accelerator pedal that merged into the highway, and I was now going on the highway 60 miles per hour. And then, driving merrily my lane, when all of a sudden a neighboring car cuts my lane to half. It had lost control. And I was swerving out of the way so I wouldn't get hit. But in the process, I smashed the left guardrail, or smashed the right guardrail, I hit one car, another car, and I smashed back into the left guardrail, and my car is perpendicular to the bridge, right? It's about to flip over. Yeah, and I'm 22 years old, and I'm thinking, the only thought that came to my mind was, Tayo, you haven't done everything you said you were going to do. You haven't done everything you said you were going to do. I was this 10-year-old kid that I just told you about that, wanted to change the world. Oprah and the late Nelson Mandela are my heroes. And I was going to do that. And I couldn't answer that question. My instincts kicked in, adrenaline kicked in, slammed the brakes, came out somehow of the car, and it was in the middle of the highway. My car was completely totaled. There were two cars hit. If you're standing there, you'd have seen a car zoom past me. Zoom! And I knew then and there that I had to change. I had to change my environment. I had to change certain things. So I quit my job shortly after that, and I moved to New York City, for my MBA, and then the rest. And it really just began to take control of my life, which is what led me down the path of saying use your difference to make a difference. Because I just that moment just made me realize that life can be like that. And you can face your mortality any moment. And I was freaked out by the fact that I didn't have anything to show for that. And so visa, whatever issue, it didn't matter to me, because I figured whatever was going to happen will happen. But the only thing that I wanted to be able to live with was me being proud of the decisions I made. And that's what I learned from that near experience.
That is such an important point. And I love that that overall message of you looked at that moment in your life and you realized that you didn't have enough to show for what for your life at that point. And that's something for myself that I often kind of fight with, and I try to make sure that with what I'm doing, and especially at this point, I'm 17 years old now, turning 18 in a month, and I'm at the point where it's just I want to make sure that what I'm doing, I have something to show for. I'm proud of what it is I'm doing, and so that right there really connects a lot with me, and the wish and the hope that, you know, the work that I'm doing, that one, it makes me proud, but two, that it's affecting other people, and that it's making a positive and hopefully huge impact on other people's lives, whether it be a chain reaction or, you know, one person just, you know, blows up or whatever it is. It's that feeling that you want to accomplish something that will impact, you know? And I love that idea that, and I think it's something that, again, that's something that people maybe kind of overthink. They don't realize how important it is until they're in a moment where they are, you know, questioning what's happening, or what can I do next, or I'm about to die when I'm not happy. It's that moment you're like, am I proud of, you know, what I've accomplished? Am I proud of my life? And I think that is a huge question that needs to be asked, you know, wherever you are and whatever age you are. You know, are you proud of what you are accomplishing, what you dream? And I really love, I love that was kind of what you pulled from there. From experience.
Yeah. Life's too short.
And so, as you moved on, as you went from that experience, you know, you started using the message, you know, using your differences to make a difference. You said, I saw that you then moved so that you could start. You called it like a social experiment, and in order to, and then that then became your podcast. So I want to talk a little bit more about your podcast in a bit, but I also want to talk about TCK on a mission. So two questions there. First one is, what does TCK mean?
TCK is an acronym for Third Culture Kid, and a Third Culture Kid refers to people who spend the formative periods of their lives outside of the parents' cultures. So this is diplomatic kids, this is missionary kids, this is anyone who's happened to have moved around a lot and identifies many places as home. And so the reason why on my website say TCK on a mission is because that's a definition of my identity, right? But I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to build global leaders. That's what I'm trying to do.
That was my second question.
Yeah. I'm on a mission to build global leaders. And what led to the podcast was, once I had that experience, I was like, you know what? I've lived this life where I let the world define me. 85 job rejections, so I thought I wasn't good enough. So what do I have to offer? Let me start with who I am. And who I am at my core is a third culture kid. Embrace that identity. And I said, now I'm going to attach that to a mission, which is something I've had for the longest time. I've lived in country that had a series of bad leaders, and I've always wanted to make sure other people were heard, seen, and understood. So why didn't I go around doing that? And my social experiment was, I was looking around the world. We have the internet. We're talking now on Skype, and we are more globalized than ever. But why is it that many people are still disconnected? And so I just thought about this idea of bringing people who grew up the way I did and have them teach people about the global mindset. And that was how it started. And I would since morphed into even much more than that. But that was the initial premise of the podcast. It's going to help people embrace the global identity. And I went on Twitter and I used the hashtag TCK. Both of them, hashtag TCK, hashtag Third Culture Kids. And I just put that in the search bar, saw a bunch of people. And people that I saw identified with that will put that in the bios. I was like, I just created this Twitter list of them. And I started to tweet them or DM them or, whenever I could. And said, hey, I'm putting together this podcast for third culture kids like ourselves. I wanted to know if you'd be willing to tell your story. And the interesting thing started to happen. I started to get a lot of yeses. I got over 80 yeses. So I had 80 rejections to 80 yeses.
Yes,
and
I love that.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh, finally someone said yes. But then the other thing I was thinking, I was like, I got to figure out how to do a podcast, because I just randomly said I was going to do a podcast. So I took a quick course, learned that, and I started, interviewing a bunch of people over Skype, released it. And then, I was going to school at night. I was getting my MBA here at Fordham in New York City. And then I'll interview people, depending on the time zone, different parts of the world. I'll just have them talk about their TCK story, what they learned, and what the world can learn. And that was the premise. And then gradually started to build a community, because I would also write from the perspective of Third Culture Kid in my blog. And I would join all the TCK websites and everything. I would just contribute content. And my concept was just, I'm just going to share knowledge and resources, and maybe someone will learn something from that. Yeah. Eventually, I did that enough to the point where people started to associate the word with me, and they thought I invented the word. I was like, no, this is the 1950s. It's not me. It's something that I saw there. But it made me see, it gave me a glimpse of what happens when you create a community of people who have probably not felt like they've been heard for a long time. A lot of times when you listen to TCKs, they'll tell you, when you ask them what's home, that's the most dreaded question for them. Like, how many minutes do you have? Or, their identity, sometimes you go back home, you're a hidden immigrant because you might look like you're the people, but people don't, you have different sensibilities. And so creating that platform just gave me a glimpse into what could happen at scale. So I continued to do that. And then gradually, other people that weren't TCKs started listening to podcasts. In fact, I was going to bed one day and someone sent me a congratulations message. I was like, for what? And they're like, hey, you made Entrepreneur's Top Business Podcast in 2014. And I was freaking out. I was like, this is Entrepreneur. And I didn't even know it was defined as a business podcast. I just thought I was doing this cultural thing. But turns out that a lot of people love the concept of the use your difference to make a difference, but also love the idea of, they relate to the fact that everyone's unique and that they can do something about it. But they also saw how they could apply that to their mindset in applying businesses. And then I started to bring on people from different parts of the world, regardless of where they were. I would have them, they'll be entrepreneurs, whatever, talk about their experiences, the unique thing they were doing, and have them talk about how they're using the difference to make a difference at the end. And it started to grow from there. And I needed to, obviously this wasn't paying any bills, and I was getting ready to graduate, but I was building a brand and I was building a community. So I needed to sort of figure out what to do. And eventually I was able to leverage that into speaking engagements and as well and consulting. But it all started once I decided to own my identity, own my story, and really just be unapologetic about who I am. And once that happened, and once I created a community of people who felt the same way, business ideas started to come. And I became credible because I became credible in the thing that I'm an authority of, which is myself and my experiences. And that's what morphed into what I do right now. But I could not have seen that back then. Yeah. I just need to do the work of being unapologetic in myself, and it led to this.
And that is interesting. Your that identity of not necessarily having an identity. I find that very interesting, and I think it lends well to being able to tap into what makes you unique, because you're not necessarily what would you say? You're not necessarily locked in one place.
Yeah.
There's just so much there, of course, as every person has layers, but even your growing up, even your life has layers, your culture has layers, because you have so many, different cultures that really are a part of who you are. And that is that's such an intriguing part, I think, about a person, because most people, they grow up and they're probably in, one place. They grow up in the same house or in the same kind of neighborhood or same kind of area, same, kinds of people. And I think it's harder to be able to really get a lock on who you are when you are just kind of you're surrounded by the same kind of people. Whereas when you get that chance, like you did, and then of course, then going into the world and having to realize, what that means, you have that chance to really be able to see what all those little pieces mean and how they connect to who you are and how those little pieces can connect to the world and what you can do. I just love that, TCK on Mission, what you're doing there with that, and being able to also bring that knowledge to other people who don't know what that means to live in that kind of life, or, to be able to relate with someone like that and just hear a person's story. That's important. I love that.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, I needed to learn how to turn my identity crisis into a gift. Yeah. And that's what I strove to do. But yeah, no, you're very good at putting that together, but that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
And I one other thing there that I actually have a question about, I guess, or at least something I would like you to comment on, is just what you do, or how you started off. You started off with getting, the stories of TCKs, of just having people share their stories and hear, their messages. And that really, for me, that sounds like something that's necessary for this world, and especially now where people become very detached and very focused on their own lives, and not, like you said, people, you have this whole global connection, this ability to reach anybody from anywhere, but we're still very focused on ourselves, very, selfish. We're still very self-motivated, and we don't really care to really reach out as much as we really can. And so I wonder, why you think that is, first of all, why you think that people still can't get out of their own bubble, right? And then how can someone, I guess, shift their mindset to want to be able to see the world and see that there's other ways of being?
Yeah, no, I think it's all in the stories we tell, from the media to every other, outlet we have, right? So the world tends to sort of give this distorted view of how the world is. I remember when I first came here, I told you no one believed that I'm Nigerian because they had a preconceived notion about what an African is, right? So they would make certain noises. And I'm like, no, that's from South Africa. That's actually that's a tribe in South Africa. Wow. I'm from West Africa. They'll do the Nanzigomnia Bagati Baga. And I'm like, that's the Lion King. Right. Once again, I'm from West Africa. I'm like, so I know, but all these things, for some reason, have been ingrained in our head. Whenever a comedian or anyone says something about Africa, it's a very interesting primitive view of how it is. And so that type of narrative is often passed down on. It's not just with Africa or other countries in the media we consume, and it becomes so commonplace that a lot of us have been unable to distinguish between jokes and realities. Yeah. And so that's one of the problems where your unconscious sort of plays into that. The other thing is with education. If you look at a lot of the education systems, you don't tell the complete stories. A lot of I look at a lot of curriculums. I talk to a lot of schools. People always get surprised. I didn't know that happened. I didn't know that was a thing that happened. Could you conquer that? I thought you always conquered. And so we as a community need to do a good job of telling complete stories in our curriculum, and also be more responsible that we don't tell false stories with the movies, YouTube videos, all that, because those things are impression. They're things that a lot of impressionable youth take into contact. And to round it up, I feel like there are two reasons why people don't feel like they can change the world, and it's because of a fixed mindset and a limited worldview. Right, so a fixed mindset, thinking that you're only limited to certain capabilities, that because of who you are, or maybe you didn't go to the school, that you're not going to be able to achieve that. And I felt that, right? The 85 job rejections, all that, not being from America. And then I had to break out of that to realize that I could be more. And then the other is a limited worldview. Too many people don't understand that the world is bigger than them. And that the way to actually succeed in it is to actually understand that is the reality. And so I feel like if more people start becoming curious about the world and people that are different from them, and really exploring what those differences are, or who they are in those different environments, we'll have a much more, a better chance of achieving the peaceful environments we have. Because you can't go into another culture, another environment thinking you're better than them, because that could be perceived by them, which could have people's guards up, and you would also act in an ethnocentric way, which perpetuates stereotypes, and that doesn't do anything for growth. So it's this cycle of education and ethnocentrism, but also all of us need to exercise some sense of bravery and curiosity on our ends to really just step into the world and accept it for what it is and just explore.
That is so on point, because I honestly, that's been one of my issues when it comes to the education system. I often feel like I'm missing out on important things, and oftentimes I am. A lot of the things that I learned that I still think about or talk about to this day are not things that I learned in school, but things I had to Google on my own, or
right.
my parents and ask them about it, and
right.
Even having like the podcast and talking to people that have had different experiences, it's like that's where I've learned the most, about people and from people and about
exactly.
the world. And like you said, having that, people need that curiosity, that ability to just like, okay, if I don't know about it, let me see what I don't know, let me learn about what I don't know. And I think that's so on point. I love that you brought up that point.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about your focus now. So you talk about how you focus on culture and impactful communication, right? The cultural and impactful communication. So I want to know what it means, or let's start with how important it is to communicate across cultures impactfully.
Well, it's the most important thing. I mean, if you look at the world right now, we have interesting leaders, regardless of where your political views may be. The fact of the matter is, leadership is impacted by how people communicate. And whether it's your foreign policy, whether it's you understanding how a law that you are pushing for can affect certain type of people, communication is key. And if you don't know how to communicate across cultures, across differences, you're not going to be able to understand how one law can affect different sets of people, because you're not tapping into your perspective taking, your empathy or emotional intelligence, because you're only seeing it from one end, right? And that's a one-way thing. Communication should be two-way, three ways, whatever. So there's that end. And then also, if it's on the youth, between friends, me and you, the way that we can grow is if I know how I'm saying something that could be detrimental to you. The Me Too movement is another thing like that. Sometimes there's an element of the Me Too movement where some men might have said, I didn't know that. How? And then the women and you don't understand how your actions are impacting these women's lives, and these things need to be made known, right? So communication is key, and it's much more than just verbal. It's things you don't say. It's the body language. It's everything. And so my goal is to help people communicate their messages with impact. So if they want to be able to, like you and me, go on stages, build programs, but I also want them to be able to have that intersectionalism where it reaches people in a different way and acknowledges the differences. But the other element of what I do is to help people communicate across cultures. That affects, and I work with a lot of companies with that, because people hire, fire, and promote based on all these biases and nuances that they have. And so if you're someone in a position of power and you're hiring, so you're potentially interviewing for a position and someone of color comes there, or a woman, or someone that you're not usually familiar with, and you let your bias make that decision for you, like, nah, you don't look like this role, you don't look like that role. You're doing yourself and your company a disservice, but you're missing out on potential diversity of opinions, which could lead to innovative solutions, which could also lead to you not having H&M saying coolest monkey in the jungle and having that ascribed to a black man, like those type of things. Like these things happen from the bottom up, and they play a role in every single thing we do. And too many times people don't understand that comes from the communication and how you're taught and how that is. And so that's what I strive to do. Strive to get people out of their comfort zone and really start asking questions about things they don't know, because that's the key to learn how to communicate.
I think that's really on point. I think for me, I know I've grown up in a house where communication was one of the key aspects of my relationship with my parents, with my brother, with almost any family member at all. Communication was that first thing that we learned that we needed to have and develop. And even from like the smallest things of how my parents, when they talked to me, it was never they never spoke in baby talk, and they always told me what it was I needed to hear. They were never all very gentle with me. I mean, they were gentle obviously because they're parents, but they made sure that they didn't like coddle or anything, and they taught me that I could ask them questions if I didn't understand, and if they told me to do something, of course, in a respectful way, and I didn't quite understand, then I could ask and use my voice and communicate with them if I disagreed or whatever it was. And I think that's such an important message to share, and the fact that communication, again, not just with words, but with body language and how you approach a situation or someone, to be able to communicate is, I think, such a valuable asset and a necessary tool to be able to grow and to be able to relate with others and build connections with others and to grow business. And like you said, that's such a big issue that we're facing right now with the biases, and because so many people are so uneducated about other people about the world, and you hinder yourself in that way. I've been having conversations with a few people on the show discussing how biases can hinder a person. I think, can you talk a little bit more about how, from what you've seen, because I know that you go around and you often consult for companies, and of course you speak. Have you seen any biases and how they have affected people or affected companies, and can you talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had, conversations with many people in the companies, and people sometimes will take me aside and say, I've got to be honest with you, I've never really seen a woman being an engineer, or I don't, this is something I'm struggling with, but, whenever I'm around people of color, I tend to have my guard up because of what I've seen in the news. And, they say all these things to me when we do unconscious bias training, but some of these biases never get to be worked out because we never create the opportunity for all these things to be said out loud, because no one wants to feel like they're, a bigot or a racist or a sexist. And so, yeah, I mean, I hear it, and it affects everyone. I mean, first of all, bias is something that everyone has, right? This is something that doesn't make you racist or anything. It's a protective mechanism that we've had since the beginning of time. Whether you know that you're not supposed to go in front of a lion, you have some bias. Yeah. And it's the dangerous part is when the unconscious bias that you sort of feed into, and then you just make decisions about based on those. So yeah, I've had plenty of decisions, whether it's leaders or people from middle management express those things to me. And for the most part, I mean, the good part is after we do these trainings, they're like, okay, I want to work through it. What can I do? And, and the simple thing is, first of all, obviously acknowledging it, and then exposing yourself to those environments, right? And making sure that you ask questions and understanding what your triggers are, and then working through those, and then repeating. It's like a habit. It has to be done. It's not something that you can just do because you've made a decision to change. It has to be a lifelong habit. It has to be something you catch yourself in, and you're like, oh my goodness, I did that again. I'm going to do better about that. And I think that ends up being intimidating for people, because sometimes I'll do these trainings, they'll acknowledge it, they'll understand it's a big deal, and then you follow up with them later, and they'll be like, I didn't really do anything about it, because it's, they don't really see the immediate effect of that. And then I always push back and say, well, let me paint this scenario for you. Let's say you don't see the immediate effect, but your son, your daughter has seen you interact with certain types of people a certain way. Now, your son and daughter goes to school and behaves the same way. He or she grows up, and there's a whole generation of people who are just as biased and towards a certain group of people. How do you think you've impacted that person's life? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's true. And then I probe further, but like, you saw Charlottesville? Those are a bunch of people that were in college as well. I'm 28. They were a lot younger than me. How do you think they came up with those thoughts? And then it starts to fester. Just because you can't see the immediate results from now, like tomorrow, doesn't mean that the effect is not there. Because every one of us has the potential to be a leader, a CEO, or something. But if we haven't checked and recognized these unconscious behaviors that we have, or acknowledge them, there's no telling what impact that could make, or that could have on someone, or who we are unintentionally influencing. Because people are impressionable, and you just don't know who's taking what from you. So it's very important to develop very good habits when you're interacting with people from different backgrounds, even if they feel uncomfortable, because in the long run, you will be better. Your interactions will be better, and you'll also be able to teach people knowingly or unknowingly. So that's what I have to say about that.
And of course, to get to that place, like you were saying, I mean, that to get to that place where you're able to want to make that change comes from, like you were talking about, that ability to communicate and to be able to learn from other people. I think from what you said, to me, it sounds like a lot of people, or a majority of people, we see what's right in front of us, so maybe we kind of have an inability sometimes to see beyond that, and to see beyond who we're touching, and who we're impacting, and also the legacy that we kind of can create depending on how we think and what we do. So that's very, very powerful to think that. I mean, I know, and I learned this before, that with a lot of the biases, a lot of racism, and it's a learned behavior. It's something that we're taught.
Of course, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's of course that breeds that legacy of other people thinking that same way, right? Yeah. And so to think in that mindset, to think, okay, so how will my mindset right now affect my legacy, and who comes after me? That's that mindset needs to take place as well. Can you tell us how for people that maybe they want to really start seeing the world, and being able to see people that they haven't seen before, talk to people they haven't talked to before, but they don't really know how to get into that place or how to communicate in that way. What can someone do? How can they even learn to communicate, globally, culturally?
Good question. You can do what both of us do with our podcast, right? So a lot of times, if you don't know something, be the resource of that thing. So for me, whenever I'm admittedly a nerd, but I love it. I'm a proud nerd. I read a lot and I consume a lot of information. But a lot of times when you get hit with you don't have enough experience, well, why are you doing this? Just become the person that is curating the information for that. So ask a bunch of people you admire that are already doing what you want to do, similar questions. And if you're a writer, put it in a blog format, make it in a series. If you're a podcaster or someone that likes to do YouTube, you just get a bunch of people similar and have them do, ask them the questions that you want to know.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? And then what happens is, one, you start to become associated with these thought leaders in the space, and then you become one of those. But the other thing is, like you said, you get educated in interesting ways. Like, this is much more than what you get in school, because this is your opportunity to ask whatever you want to ask. And a lot of people love the idea when you stroke the ego and see them as an expert or something and say, hey, I see you as an expert in this. Can you please give me 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes? We'll promote that. They just love, that strokes their ego. So once you do that enough, you're able to, you get that curated approach of what the world is like, and you hear a lot of things, and that will inevitably open your mind to different possibilities. You get tips on all those type of things that you want to do because you're asking them.
Yeah.
And then you will be able to be more informed about those decisions. And so it all comes down to just tapping into your curiosity. We have to do. A lot of times we have things in our mind and we have to do. That's what my car accident really made me get out of. I gave myself, I thought, I tried. I did. I really did. 85, all I was like, fine, whatever. And then I just fell into the thing that happens. I was like, man, I failed. There's nothing. There's no point. But once you get reawakened, you realize that it's not about you tried a certain amount of times. It's about you change an approach, change an environment, and continue to try or start something different. And then you learn. And so, just become a resource for what it is that you want to know and ask the questions.
I love that, because that's actually a reason why I started the podcast too, was that I had started this, this idea of the UV effect and unique value and what that meant, but I needed to learn more about what that meant for me and what that could mean for other people. So I was like, maybe I'll start a podcast and see if this connects with people in some way. And I think that is, you keep saying things that throughout this interview, you say things that are kind of, that are people that it's known, but it's so people just look over, like they look past, they don't realize how accessible this is, or how how real it is. And that kind of idea where you can be the resource for what it is you want to know, that's powerful stuff, and that can really launch a person to getting to a place that they want to be, instead of having to wait for someone to come and tell them. You would just ask the question. I love that.
Too many things are simple, but they're not easy to do. Yes. Right? There's a difference between simple and easy. A lot of people know what they should do. I know if I want to get bigger at the gym, I know what I should do. But what's blocking you from doing it? If I want to, pass this class, I should read this more. What's blocking you to do that? And a lot of people need to get over that hump. And it's the same sort of thing with this. The limiting belief that you're not enough is something that I try to fight for people every day. I try to remind people that it has to come from them. But I try to remind them that, hey, look, you already know there's just limiting belief. Let's work towards that. So,
So I really appreciate you being here today. I want to make sure I give you a chance to share anything else that you want to touch on, maybe even links in social media so people can follow you before we leave today.
Sure. I'm at Ty Rockson everywhere on social. I think I'm the only one so far. Ty Rockson. So TyRockson.com. I write occasionally, so I have a newsletter as well. Instagram, same thing. And then I have a couple of courses. I do one on how to be a thought leader, Thought Leader Academy. So that's thoughtleaderprogram.com. But everything that I do is basically on TyRockson.com. And if you want to follow me anywhere on social, just type in Ty Rockson and I'll be there. But Say hi. I love talking to people.
Everybody be sure to reach out. I mean, I have all the links down below, so you will see everything there, and you can click through and check Mr. Rockson out, because honestly, I'm very grateful for this conversation. I'm the kind of person that would prefer to be in a room with multiple different people that have had extremely different, experiences than myself, than a bunch of people that have had the same experiences as me, because I love that ability of just being able to meet and learn new things. And as you're talking about communication, being able to communicate, culturally and learning other people's lives. And I appreciated this conversation that we got to have. And I really hope that other people will reach out to you and be able to see what it is you're doing, and to be able to reach out and have conversations with you as well. So again, just thank you so much. And I look forward to all that you're going to be able to do, and just best wishes and everything.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hopefully we'll get you on the podcast as well. But I've got to say, great questions. I'm so honored that you created this space for me to share this opinion. I love the fact that you're on this path of just greatness already. I can see it, and I love that you've committed to doing this. So back to you, man. And this is truly a highlight of my day today. And thank you for even being considering me someone worthy to talk to.
And thank you so much. And I hope that we will definitely continue to communicate in the future.
Absolutely, 100%.
Thank you so much for joining me for the episode of the UV Effect podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Rockson. And if you did, be sure to head over to GabrielJordanInspires.com/041, where you can check out all of his information. This is the UV Effect Rockson's podcast page, which means you can listen to his interview again on this page, as well as scroll down and find all his information, his website, his social media, his podcast. If you want to connect with him, that's where you can go. You can also head over to iTunes to leave some comments and subscribe to the UV Effect podcast. And leave some comments, let people know how you're liking the show. We want to make sure that they come on over and listen into if you're loving it as well. Also, head over to the UV Effect podcast on Instagram. It's actually just the UV Effect. You can follow us over there to check out what's coming up next, new episodes, episode quotes, as well as some fun behind the scene clips that we post on the Insta story section. Also, quick announcement before we end this episode. This is actually the last interview of the season. Yes, this is the last interview of the season, which means the next episode will be, which is the UV15, will be the final episode of season 3. So I hope that you will be here to join us on season 3 episode. There will be some announcements on the next and the last episode. So definitely be sure to join us over there next Tuesday for another episode of the UV Effect podcast. Thanks again, and I'll see you then.